2, 1.
Hi, everyone. Dale Pinkert here, TradeGATEHub, sponsored by TradeView Markets. And I have the pleasure of being able to meet and have a conversation with Tom Luongo. Tom, great to meet you. Thanks for granting an interview and being on with me. And I did a little bit of preparation for this interview. I'm not sure what tweet caught my attention, but that's where I meet a lot of my guests is on Twitter. So
sure.
Welcome. Thank you very much for being here.
Sure. Absolutely, Dale. Good to meet you. And, thanks for the invite. I have a rule. I'll do everybody's show once and then we'll see what happens after that, depending on how things go. Usually it goes just fine, but I just want to be.
Oh God. I feel so much pressure now. My hair is turning gray. Anyway, Tom, so, your background as a research chemist, but, while I was preparing for this, I heard you talking about there was a time period in your life where you were doing a lot of commuting. And during those commutes, you were listening to talk radio. Did you listen to guys like Libor and some of these other people and say, you know what, I could do this. And in fact, you know what, I could be better?
No, I didn't listen to Libor because Libor was, Libor, I would listen to every once in a while just to take notes of how good he was, because he's an amazing broadcaster, regardless of his politics or anything else. An amazing broadcaster. Now, what happened to me was just listening to, I was in that mode of that point in my life where I was moving from job to job. And I had a job up in Jacksonville. I was stationed in Gainesville at the time. I'm a little north of Gainesville now, in an undisclosed location in North Florida, known as the Compound. And but I had a job in Jacksonville, then I took a job south of Ocala, and these are about hour commutes in every direction. So for about a year and a half, and this was between 2000 and 1999 and 2000, which is when Y2K hit, and I lost a whole bunch of money in the stock market. And so politically, I was trying to figure out what was going on. And that's really during the period when I realized that, I know why I was so angry as a kid at the political system, which was that didn't serve me. I knew both sides were lying, even from the time I'm 6 years old. So, I was listening to Neil Bortz one day and he said, hey man, take the world's smallest political quiz. I did. I went home and I told my wife, oh my God, honey, I know what our problem is. We're libertarians.
Yeah.
And that was it. And then we were off to the races.
So being here in the US right now is probably the worst time for libertarian, because both sides, both extremes want to take liberties away.
Oh yeah. But at the same time, Dale, what the funny part about it is that the pendulum always swings, right? I mean, we are in 2023, 15 years after the first Ron Paul run in 2008, where he began to really popularize the undercurrent of what was the silent majority of the people going, this system that they've got for us makes no sense. And he started attacking foreign policy, tying it to monetary policy, and that awakened, I honestly believe, an entire generation of people, or 2 generations of people. And of course, what we have since then is an extreme reaction from the entrenched powers that be to figure out, one, how to co-opt those ideas and turn them against themselves, which they've done very successfully. And the Libertarian Party since then has been completely almost worthless.
I remember interviewing John McAfee, who wanted the nomination for the Libertarian Party. I don't know. I think that was 2018 or 16.
But they ran people like Bill Wells. They ran people like they ran Bill Wells and Gary Johnson. They ran people like Bill Barr. Wayne Allen Root took over the party in 2004, which is when I got out. Right.
Okay.
And realized that the path to practical politics and the path to this is going to be education. It's going to be steadfast. It's going to be on the internet. It's not going to be beaten. It's not going to be doing practical politics at the county level. Believe me, I tried. Okay. And I beat my head against the wall against communist Alachua County, and it was a waste of time.
Okay, so let's prep people for some of the things that are occurring beneath the surface, and start with the Fed. And we could start with grassroots stuff. Do you have expectations for what they're going to do?
They will raise 25 basis points tomorrow. Tomorrow.
And pause?
No, they'll raise 25 basis points again in June. The LIBOR markets are telling us this. Even the Fed funds futures curves are telling us this, though reluctantly. The
market's wrong-footed. The market wants to hear one and done.
So that's what some of the market wants, and other parts of the market are grudgingly coming to the conclusion that Powell is serious. What's important, and this is something that Daniel DiMartino Booth brings up all the time, which is what's important is shrinking the balance sheet. That QT continues to happen, that they continue to roll the treasuries off their balance sheet, they continue to contract credit, and as I've been saying for 2 years, to shrink I use the term offshore dollar markets in order to make it as simple as possible.
The euro dollar market, which is no more, which was so huge.
It's not no more. It's the leverage within that market is dying. This is one of the things I chatted with when I was chatting with Caitlin Long, and Caitlin and I continue to have like a Twitter conversation in the background and DMs about this stuff. And it's fascinating. It's great. All completely, supportive of each other, trying to figure out what's going on, because it's a challenge just to figure out what's going on. But what's important is the leverage within the euro dollar system. That's what Powell doesn't want. Pushing dollars offshore, there's nothing they can do about that. Like if the Fed tries to repatriate a whole bunch of dollars and the dollars don't want to be here because it's too expensive to process them here, then they're going to move offshore. But as long as they're not levered up again at the zero bound to infinity in order to, to fund the most nefarious projects imaginable, like the global takeover by communists, well, then, that's a good thing. It's a net win for humanity. As we go through this process of deleveraging both the offshore dollar system and parts of the onshore dollar system, there's going to be a lot of reorganization. There's going to be a lot of bank failures. There's going to be a lot of people screaming. There's going to be a lot of oxen being gored. And you know what? Most of the people screaming are the people whose oxen are being gored, and you have to stop listening to them and just realize that, like everybody else, every other freaking Wall Street punter, they're just talking their book.
Okay, so talking my book.
Sure.
I want to know something about your view that Powell is actually a firewall for us, and and so many people are detractors. I interviewed a guy and I said, well, Vic, do you think the Fed is making a policy error? And he said, Dale, the Fed always makes policy errors.
Well, yes, they do. But, but policy error in this case, and this is, again, one of those things that when I had Daniel Booth on my podcast, I brought up the concept of the policy error, because I said, everybody's screaming policy error. And she's like, yeah. And do you think it wasn't deliberate? This was a policy error that was deliberately and with open eyes, they went into this policy error. And I think that we have to come to terms with that. And this isn't your father's Fed. This isn't the Bernanke Fed. It isn't the Yellen Fed. Okay. It would be easier if it was. It would be better for my libertarian street cred, for whatever value you want to place on that, which I would, that. It's not.
This is different to me, because I saw Powell the first time, and he's flipped a few times, in 2018. He was still tightening, and Kramer had his rant and everything. And then a week later, he's singing Kumbaya with Yellen and Bernanke. They got a hold of him and he flipped. So is he different?
Yeah, I think he is. And I think the reason
I want to know how.
I will see, the thing is, for me, I think the issue here is it's about the LIBOR transition. Okay. It was in 2018, they were just putting the basics of SOFR together, right? The secured overnight funding rate. So the switch away from the London and European banks, the offshore dollar markets, the LIBOR banks, setting monetary policy for the Fed. The Fed wasn't setting monetary policy during.
The markets were.
Well, yeah. Okay, fine. If you really want to say that that there's real markets at the zero bound, I don't think those are real markets, because we already had maximal central planning. We were at the zero bound for 13 years in 2018 or 2010.
That's true.
So that's not a market any more than, Jeff Snyder makes the argument that the Eurodollar system is a free market response to this central planning. I'm like, that's the most naive take I've ever heard. And I'll bite me, bro. I don't care. Like, when the Federal Reserve is not able to set its own monetary policy, and then you ask yourself what the global marketplace for dollars looks like. Tell me that with our centrally planned economy here in the United States, and our central planning of dollars and offshore banks setting the rate for our debt, the debt indexing rate for all U.S. debt, basically making it an imperative that if Europe catches a cold, we have to get that cold as well in order to save them. And I'm like, that's not a free market. You know what a free market looks like?
Yeah,
the free market looks like SOFR. It looks like an honest to God money market in a repo markets that are going to be set by the marketplace, and the Fed can kind of almost walk away eventually with the Fed funds rate. I think the Fed funds rate is going to go away if SOFR gets its way. I think the Fed funds rate goes away, and we all just trade versus we just trade versus SOFR, and the banking system actually becomes stronger. I mean, that's the whole long-term purpose of SOFR.
Okay.
Right. Because, but that's the way everything should be.
All right. Well, then tell us Davos is against this system because you're implying that, the Fed is at war with Davos and there are some elites pushing back on the Davos agenda. Is the Davos agenda what most people call the Great Reset?
Yes. And then take it one step further. It's anti-dollar.
Okay.
Okay, it's very anti-dollar.
You know what? I have not heard as much fear. I have a pretty good feel for the marketplace.
Sure.
As John Q. Public is asking me about the dollar. Someone who's never been in the market saying, Dale, what's going on with the dollar? What should I do? I had my shoes shine the other day, and I had to pay with euros. Right here in California. No, I'm kidding you. But anyway, it's reached that level.
Yeah, it has.
Don't you think?
Well, it has, because it's part of the script. Look, de-dollarization is real. The global South is done with this stuff. It's done with the dollar imperialism. And there's we could do 2 hours just talking about how China's trying to shake down the old IMF money laundering, the whole IMF neo-colonial thing that they're doing with the World Bank in Africa. I could go on to that for freaking 30 minutes. But if you really, really dig into this, you are beginning to hear everybody say the same thing. Even Europe is saying we need to get off the dollar. Right. Okay. Now there's a reason. There's a reason for that. And that is because they've set it up such that, and they've got their guys sitting in Washington, D.C., the Yellens and the Bidens. I refuse to say that we actually have a president. Obama's the president. Biden is the placeholder. So these people are there to ensure that the dollar continues to be under attack institutionally, politically, at the banking system, and all the rest of it. Let's look at what happened with First Republic Bank the other day.
Okay.
JP Morgan didn't have to be convinced very hard to buy First Republic Bank, which is completely opposite of what Bernanke forced on them with Lehman Brothers. Lehman Brothers was completely and utterly bankrupt.
They had to jam it down Jamie's throat.
Yes, and Diamond has said for the last 10 years, he said it was the biggest mistake I ever made was going along with Bernanke.
Being extorted.
Yeah, he was extorted by them.
Paulson.
Yeah, and Paulson. Absolutely. Booth goes over that in her book, Fed Up. Great stuff. But look at what was happening during First Republic Bank's meltdown. Diamond and others were putting money in to stabilize the bank's outflow. And all that. So there was really nothing wrong with First Republic's balance sheet, because if there was, they would have let it go. So now ask yourself this question, Dale. I saw yesterday, somebody posted on my Twitter feed. They said, oh, by the way, BlackRock wanted to buy FRC, First Republic Bank. And
BlackRock's had to get bailed out with partners coming in.
Wait, think about this. I just wrote this big article the other day about BlackRock and Yellen now wanting to lobby it as label it as a SIFI, right? As a SIFI. It's a systemically important financial institution. Bring it under the auspice of the Treasury if it gets into trouble. That's your clue. It is in trouble. So So I just thought, literally was thinking about this morning when I was writing some stuff for my patrons, and I said, oh, BlackRock wanted to buy First Republic Bank. Why? So that BlackRock can then have political cover to say, yes, we're a bank now, which this is an idea. This is a label that they have resisted for years. for 15 years. So since Dodd-Frank went into effect, they've been saying, no, we're not a CFD because we don't use leverage, because we don't do this, yada, yada, yada. I wrote all about this the other day. So now look at what happened. Diamond swoops in and says, no, tells Yellen, back off, tells the FDIC, we have a better deal, and will buy the bank. And there was nothing wrong with the bank. It was all a whisper campaign to destroy the bank in order to start the bank run. By the way, who do you think had whose deposits do you think left First Republic Bank? Do you think it wasn't like all of these Davos trolls like Soros and the rest of them just pulled all their money out and then seeded everything into the financial headlines? Because that's exactly what you saw. Okay. And then that happens at the same time that the Fed is taking out Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank, and the other one, right? All at the same time. So, and Credit Suisse was happening. This is nothing more than a big financial chess game, or for better term, this is a series of major battles happening within the financial system. If you think about this in terms of a war, and all of these companies being, flags on a battlefield, it's the same thing. And Diamond and Company and the Fed won this round because by keeping BlackRock away from First Republic Bank, now it short circuits Yellen saying, oh yeah, we need to regulate them as a CFI, so that when BlackRock goes under, which it's going to do,
I won't shed a tear.
Then, well, no one will shed a tear. But here's the thing: what were they going to do once it's under the auspices of the Treasury as a CFI? Then Yellen can turn around and bail the whole thing out.
Yeah, they did. They weren't able to buy their hedge. Yeah, their get out of jail free card.
Yep.
Okay. Well, that's a real interesting take on that.
That's all I can see anymore.
What the heck does Tucker Carlson have to do with BlackRock?
Well, I mean, it's just that there was the angle on the story that BlackRock kept buying bigger shares of Fox News. And it's just that all of this is happening at the same time, because what you're doing is they're setting the stage to make Biden into the war president after they upgrade the war in Ukraine or somewhere else between Russia and NATO, because that's the only way they're going to get Biden reelected. Martin Armstrong banging on his shoe on the table like Khrushchev about this point. And I think he's absolutely correct. And so the junta that we just saw in the media space last week, going after all of these prominent media people, Don Lemon, which was a counterbalance to getting rid of Tucker Carlson, but also getting rid of the guy over at Comcast. And and Nate Silver was fired from ABC News. There's a whole bunch of firings happening over at ESPN. Like, all of this is happening at the same time, and there's a consolidation of and there's a lot of warnings that were given to a lot of newsrooms. Don't step out of line. Here is the news we are going to feed you from here on out. And this is all you're allowed to. This is all you're allowed to say.
Look at what if you got a call from CNN today and they want you to do a show? Would you?
I would say no.
You would say no.
Absolutely. I can't keep my mouth shut enough to not wind up in a bad with a really bad soundbite. I'm not that well trained. So
okay. All right. Just wondering.
I have turned down. I go on RT every once in a while, and if RT asks me to go on and talk about something that I can seriously tell is Russian propaganda, and an issue that I can't spin to my own, I just turn them down. They always come. They always come back, and I just say, no, I'm not comfortable talking about that issue. That's not interesting to me. Call me when you got something better.
Okay. Why don't we shift gears a little bit to the war? You say Russia's won already.
No.
And was that?
Well, yes and no. But yeah.
Okay. Well, go ahead. I mean, I believe you go back to the fact that we weaponized the SWIFT system.
Yeah. I mean, it all depends on what theater you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. Because this war is not just on the ground at Bakhmut.
Right.
And they're winning there in Bakhmut as well. And even the worst, even the most generous Western projections about what the Russians have lost are turning out to be false. That the Russians have lost even less than that. There was one came out this morning. It was a NATO general, I think, finally just said, "Look, dudes, whatever you think is happening in Bakhmut, the Russians aren't losing anything because they mostly sent Wagner in there to clean this thing out, and they're just lobbing artillery shells. This isn't a hard war for them to fight. They continue to grind the Ukrainians disgustingly into pace, but that is the war that they were handed, and that is the only way they can prosecute this war, because the goal here is to run out the political clock on Biden, NATO, Macron, and all of these people, and force a split. At the same time, they have doubled down on their diplomacy around the world because they've gained the dividend of being the victim of aggressive Western sanctions as a model for what's going to happen to everybody else that steps out of line. And since the Russians have been able to weather this, and the Chinese have continued to back them, and then you watch the Saudis, jump ship and everything else. Now you're seeing the entire wall break. I just saw something this morning that's not only there's like a whole bunch of Middle East countries, and 19 non-Middle Eastern countries want to join the BRICS alliance.
Yeah, Brazil, South American, and a lot of resource-rich countries.
It's
agriculturally and minerals.
Yeah, no, it is. The big fight now is going to be moving to North Africa, and we've already seen that with the civil war that Victoria Nuland has fomented in South Sudan. Okay. Excuse me. And my friend Alex Craner brought it up when we were on a podcast together about a week ago, that the situation with Egypt's deteriorating finances are going to be very interesting, because the IMF is going to hold to their standard line of, oh, well, we'll restructure your debt, but we will not take a $1 worth of haircut on this debt. And we will ensure that the foreign private bondholders are all paid at par. Like, that's always the plan. And that creates this neo-colonialist
Arab Spring 2.0, Tom?
No, well, kind of. What's going to happen is the Chinese and the Russians are just going to go, you know what, we'll forgive all the debt. Okay. And just tell the IMF to go scratch, and we'll forgive part of the debt and don't pay them back and default on their debt. And when that happens, the United States and Europe are going to have to make another military move on Egypt, like Obama did 10 years ago. Again, if you look geostrategically, and if you watch things from the Russians' point of view, which I've done for a long time, you can always see whenever the Russians get a little uppity, we foment a crisis in Nagorno-Karabakh or Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan or Pakistan or some place that the Russians have to respond to. Syria being a massive one, which the Russians finally intervened in.
Yeah.
Now you're starting to see the tables turned. Now the Russians and the Chinese are poking the empire where they don't want to be poked. All in the European Union's backyard, and all those countries that use the CFA, the colonial franc, right? That Macron went over there to try and shore up his support for, and he got told to go home. They practically threw eggs at him. Okay, so they're hanging him in effigy in Paris. They're throwing eggs at him in North Africa. And yet somehow this guy is still in power. This is what the face of Davos actually looks like. And we have the same problem here in the United States with Biden et al. And until they're gone, and until they're neutered politically, we're going to continue to see this working out the way it is. And that's why I'm now focused on the debt ceiling.
Okay, so and that's, Yellen sent her letter. I've been talking about it coming earlier in June. So, most people think the big problem happens while things aren't being worked out.
Right.
I heard that once you have a debt ceiling deal, that's going to suck all the stimulus out into new treasury borrowings, which, crowd out the market. And that's going to be where liquidity goes, and then the market might take a toll because of that would tighten monetary conditions.
Yep.
What do you think is going to happen on this debt ceiling?
I'm thinking about it from a political perspective. So I'm not really going into I'm going to defer to other people who've gone through the plumbing on this, because they understand it better than me. So whenever I see a plumbing tweet or article about this stuff,
I read it. A light bulb.
Hey, Tom, I read it. Yeah. Yeah. No, what I do is I read that with as much interest as everybody else does, and goes, oh my God, I hadn't thought of that angle. But I'm thinking about it from the political strategy level and what it means. And I think it comes down to the following. The Biden administration wants a clean raise. Yellen wants a clean raise. The GOP, of course, does not, because the GOP wants spending cuts to offset the deficits that are being racked up. They want to stop that process cold. I think this is the exact reverse of when Pelosi wanted to tie all the new spending bills to the debt ceiling back in November 2021 or the fall of 2021. And the Republicans just wanted a clean raise. So again, it comes down to who's got the upper hand on getting control of the spending. And my thesis is very simple. If I'm right about the Fed and Davos and all of this stuff, then it makes sense that how the debt ceiling is resolved will tell you which faction in DC is ascendant politically, who is in control. If the GOP is able to hold their water and force through spending cuts, force through a budget reconciliation bill, which actually reduces some spending, doesn't even have to be more than a token amount. Right. It can just be symbolic. It can be, $1 trillion over 10 years, which is $100 billion out of the budget. Who cares? Right? Yeah. It's nothing. What's important is that it will be forced on the Democrats who do not want this at all, because they want to actually take Biden's budget and balloon the deficits. So they want to double the deficit. They want to make everything worse. Yellen will scream on will do what she always does, which is to scream on the part of labor, because, well, she's a Marxist. And all of her friggin' work at the Fed is literally the labor theory of value. Okay. I got another angle on the First Republic thing. Notice all the banks that blew up. They were all under the auspice, under the regulation of the San Francisco Fed, which Janet Yellen used to run, and her lackeys still run. This is a power play within the Fed itself. That's why Jamie Dimon was like, no, you're not getting First Republic Bank. And the San Francisco Fed is not setting policy for the rest of the world. The New York Fed is. Okay. Again, understand that none of these institutions are monoliths.
Yeah.
When the system starts to break down, everything starts to break down, and the sharks all turn on each other.
Okay. So you say, Tom, America is not collapsing. It's just under attack.
Yes.
All right. So give us, as we wrap this, how America is going to come through the multiple crises, both geo and financial, what the next 3-4 years, and probably next year is a big year, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I don't have a crystal ball, Dale. What I have is what I have. Give us hope, Tom. No. What I'll tell you is what the good path looks like and what you should be lobbying for. Okay. You should be hoping that the GOP wins the debt ceiling fight and crushes politically the power of Chuck Schumer as Senate Majority Leader, which he's not. Joe Manchin is Senate Majority Leader. He's the president at this point for all intents and purposes, because he holds the entire thing in his hands, right? If Matt Gaetz is actually the Speaker of the House, because he can take 15 Republicans and walk and vote of no confidence out Kevin McCarthy, that's a win, because all of these people are freaking completely compromised. So if you continue to hold their feet to the fire, if you continue to change this game, what's happening? What does that imply for what's happening behind the scenes? It means that the Fed and the New York banks are calling all their markers, going, "You want money for re-election? You think you think that Davos has Manila folder pile on you? I got one bigger."
Bigger than Soros, even Soros.
Exactly. So there comes a point where you have to ask yourself who's winning, because which Manila folders are getting dropped on whose desks, because Elon Musk has control of Twitter, because this has happened somewhere else, because we're watching the Hunter Biden laptop story start to really propagate. We're starting to see the codes of silence break down as everybody starts to go, you know what? The people who I was scared of before aren't nearly as scary as they used to be. And I can directly tell you that this is all downstream of the Russians standing up in Syria, because that's what started everything geopolitically for everybody to start showing small acts.
When we left that vacuum, when the red line was crossed and crossed and crossed.
Yep.
And Tom, I had fun talking to you. Here's your manila envelope here, buddy.
The manila envelope on me is like, the manila envelope on me is easy. I used to write for a Russian think tank, but that's it. And I own it. So what are they going to do?
So what I encourage people to, you want not the run of the mill points of view on everything that you're reading about in conventional news or biased news, whatever it is. Check Tom out. So gold, goats, and guns. I get the gold, I get the guns, but you own goats, and
I do.
so if you have a goat, you could always have goat's milk, right?
Yep.
You could make their skins for clothes. You don't eat goat, do you? People don't eat
absolutely
goat.
do. Goat's great.
Really? Okay.
No.
All right. So you're kind of like off the grid, and you'd be okay.
Not completely, but not completely. I like to call us techno hippies. Like I love my internet connection, but I compost all my coffee grounds, and I do all the things you're supposed to do, and I walk outside barefoot and go milk my goats in the afternoon. But it's a great life. I live just far enough outside of town that I have an internet service. It ain't great, but it's good enough, and I get to do this for a living. So foot in both worlds, just in case one collapses, I know have the skills in order to live in the other world. If that
well, you know what, I crowned the TradeGATEHub's most interesting man. You win the most interesting man award, Tom. It was really great talking to you. So your business model, is this free for people, or
the blog is free? But how we do this is through the Patreon. Scroll up.
Okay.
There's the page, and there's and look at Quinny, and she'll tell you what I'm talking about. Just go to Patreon and become a patron. We do a monthly newsletter. We do I do twice weekly market reports, which are video podcasts where we do where I do bespoke commentary as well as technical analysis of the markets. I go over gold, oil, silver, the
what do you
spreads
like
and everything every week.
Could gold pull back to 1800, Tom? I'll leave it there.
Yes, it could, but I liked April's monthly close a lot.
Okay.
From a bullish perspective. So let's see if we get a new high in May. If we do, then we're probably going to continue grinding higher. We just need to get away from 2000. Once 2000 is in the rearview mirror, gold will immediately jump to 2200. If it doesn't make a new all-time high and it doesn't grind higher this month, then the rally is
maybe we get a dollar rally that puts pressure on it.
I'm at the point now where I think a dollar rally and a gold rally will be, because of the same
simultaneously.
Will be fundamentally money going to ground.
I've seen it before.
So have I.
But in silver, no, you never have a true bull market in silver without a bear market in the dollar. Yep. You could check that out historically.
And you know why? Because silver is an industrial metal, not a monetary metal.
Right.
And it's the tech industrial metal.
Tom Luongo, great meeting you. Enjoyed it. Keep it up the good work of being a watchman for people.
And we'll do this again whenever you want. Just give me a call.
See, I didn't even have to be nervous. Tom Luongo. Tom Luongo, everybody. Thanks, Tom.
Be well.
You too.